Hi guys, welcome to part 2 of how to create an advanced game menu in the Blender game engine. In part 1, I went over creating all these different buttons, the main menu, and the sub-menu for each button. The buttons are clickable, and since part 1, what I did is I went ahead and created the rest of the sub-menus for the other buttons, except for settings. I will cover that hopefully in this video. But I created the credits submenu, the directions submenu, the multiplayer submenu, and the campaign submenu. In this video, I will be teaching you how to add the background so that it actually moves around when you move the mouse, and I will be teaching you how to create all these different settings for your game. In this blend, I used a Warzone background as an example, but for this demo, you can make it anything you want. So you can make it anything you want for a game. For this video, I'm going to be using this Cloudscape background as the background for the game, and a bunch of these different clouds right here as the foreground. So we're going to want to add the images as planes to our scene. So if you don't already have the Shift-A Mesh images as plane add-on enabled, press Ctrl-Alt-U to open up the user preferences and click on add-ons and then search image and then enable import images as planes. Once you've done that, just save the settings and close out of the window. So now press Shift-A, add mesh image as plane, and open the image you want to use as the background. So the one I'm going to use is this one right here. So I'm going to wait for it to open and scale it up. So this is going to be the background right here. So I will want to move it down so it's behind everything else. And I will also make it no collision. So now that you have a background, you'll want to add the foreground images as well. For the foreground images, you're going to have to import them manually because the image as plane add-on messes up the alpha. So I'm going to do Shift-A, add mesh plane, scale it up, and move it down. Apply the scale and unwrap it. I'm going to add a new material, make it shadeless, and make it transparent. I'm going to add a new texture and open the foreground image. It's going to be a cloud in my case, and enable alpha. So there's the cloud. Now you have to position over the image. You can actually go into top orthographic view and project from view bounds and scale it on the X a little bit more and apply it and make it slightly smaller. So here is one new cloud image. So do that process again for all the other foreground images. If you have more, the more the better, because it makes it look better. And once you're done with that, we will make it animated. Alright, once you have added the other foreground images, we will make them sway. So first, open the text editor and create a new script. I'm going to call it sway. And in the description, I will have a link to a little script I wrote. It will basically, wherever you move the mouse, it will kind of create an offset of the image with like motion. So if you move the mouse to the left, the cloud will go like to the right slightly. But yeah, I will have a link to this script in the description so you can download it. So add the script and select, actually add a new empty. So yeah, Shift-A, empty plane axis, and move it down. Move it down to, so if this is the cloud, move it down to about the Z position of the cloud. and make sure that it's right in the center below the cursor. Then select the cloud and parent it to the empty. Select the empty and add an always sensor with pulse mode on and a Python script. Add the Sway script and connect the two together. Next, add two properties to the same empty. They're both going to be float, and the first one's going to be called AMT X as an amount X, and the second one is going to be AMT Y as an amount Y. I'm going to make them 1 to start off with. So now if you play the game and you move your mouse around, you can see that the cloud changes position as the mouse moves. So let's pretend that this sky is actually three-dimensional and not just images. If you were going to move your mouse to the left, the cloud would probably move to the right if the mouse is your eyes. So select the empty and change amount X to -1. So that way, when you move the mouse to the left, the cloud goes to the right, and you move the mouse down and the cloud goes up. Now that's probably a really big motion, so what you can do to make it smoother is select the cloud. Under the Object tab, go down to Relations Extra, enable it, and change it to something around 10. That way, it will be a much smoother motion. You can even increase it to maybe 25. And also decrease the amount X values and the amount Y values to something smaller. So instead of -1, something like -0.75 and 1 to 0.75. That way it'll be a much more subtle motion, but it'll still add a nice effect. Duplicate the empty, move it down, and parent it to, actually select the other foreground object and parent it to that empty. Then select the cloud and add another relationship extra offset. Play the game, and the other cloud moves as well. So now you're probably going to want to change the amount X and amount Y values for this cloud so that it moves slightly more different. So this cloud is going to be behind this other cloud, so we're going to want it to move less than the cloud in front. So I'm going to change -0.75 to -0.5 and 0.75 to 0.5. Might even want to do it less, to -0.25 and 0.25. That way, if you play the game and you move your mouse around, it gives a much more three-dimensional effect. You can also do the same thing to the camera. So I'm going to add another empty, plane axis, and move it up. Then I'm going to select the camera and parent it to that empty. I'm going to select the camera and turn on slow parent and make it also 25. Add an always sensor, Python, sway, amount X, amount Y. And so if you move your mouse, the camera will also move to give it an even more three-dimensional effect. So you'll want to change the direction that it's going in. I'm going to change the Y direction to -1. So that way, if you move your mouse up, the camera moves up. If you move it left, camera moves left, right, right. So now it really looks three-dimensional. In fact, you can even select this empty that the top cloud is attached to and make it like -0.9, 0.9. That way it's a little bit more three-dimensional. You can also increase the value of this empty as well. It's -5 and 0.5. But anyway, that all depends on what images you're using and what effect you're trying to achieve. Alright, so now that our background is done, I'm going to go on to the hardest part of this tutorial, the settings. So go over to your second layer, or whatever layer you have all your submenus on, and then just select one of the submenus and Shift-D duplicate it to another spot. I'm going to select the name and name it Settings. The first setting I will make is a resolution setting. So I will select these buttons and delete them. I will duplicate this text, move it up. Actually, no. I'll duplicate this text and move it down, and I'll call it... Sorry, Blender just crashed on me. So I'll call it resolution, and I will change this text to... Again. Okay, let's try it again. I will select this text and rename it to resolution in parentheses. The parentheses don't really matter, but it's kind of just to tell me that that will be a changing number. Next, select the resolution text and add 3 game properties. The first one is going to be called val. It will be an integer. The second one is going to be x, and the third one is going to be y. And make the x and y strings. Select the settings submenu and change the name to settings handle. Alright, now create a new script and copy and paste the settings.py file to the script. I'll have a link to it in the description. Rename text to settings.py. Py part's important. Select the settings handle object and add an always sensor. Actually, there's already one here. So add a Python controller and connect the always sensor to the Python controller. Make it a module and make it settings.read settings. Add 4 properties to the object. The first one is going to be called bright, as in brightness. It will be an integer. The second one is called val, integer. Third one is player name, string. And the last one is audio, integer. Turn on debug properties on all of these properties so that you can see how they change when we read and write the settings. Now we will have to edit this settings.py script. See on this line 11 how it says own val equals int of data2. So it will be setting this val property. So now we're going to have to copy and paste this line and change it for each of these properties here. So select this line and copy it and paste it so that there are 4 of those lines. Change the first one to bright, the second one to val, the third one to player name, and the last one to audio. Now on line 13, take away the word int and its parentheses and make this number 0, the next number 1, the next number 2, and this number 3. So what this script does is it opens settings.dat as reading. It splits each line into a list, and each of these properties is going to be data, and the number means which index is going to be the property. So line 1 is going to be brightness, line 2 is going to be the value, line 3 is going to be the player name, and line 4 is going to be the audio. Now we have to do the same process for writing the settings. Select line 19 and copy it 3 times and paste it so that there are 4 of those lines. change the first one to bright. Second one, leave it at val. Third one is player name. And the last one is audio. And if you want, you can take away the words str from line 21 because it's really optional, because player name is already a string value. Next, after line 22, write writing.close. So that will basically close the file when you're done using it. Now we can see how this works if we add a keyboard sensor, and I'm going to make it the S key. I'm going to make a Python controller, connect it, make it a module, and make it settings.write settings. I'm going to disable this controller because right now there's no file to read from, and I'm going to make these values just random numbers, and for the player name a random string. So if I play the game and I hit S on my keyboard, I should get a file next to my blend file called settings.dat that contains all the values from the properties. However, the way that this file is formatted is pretty ugly and it's not going to work, so we're going to have to change how it appears so that each new value appears on a new line like this. So looking back at our script, right here on line 19, after own bright, and right outside that parenthesis, add a plus sign and parentheses, not parentheses, quotation marks, \n, and close quotation marks. What that does is it will create a new line after that, after it writes that string. Then do that for this one and this one, but not the last one. That way, if we play our game and I hit S, my file will be on a new line for each separate value. Now to test if the read settings module works, I'm going to re-enable this controller and just change some of these values for these properties. So right now bright is -121, value is 150, player name is something, and audio is -270. And in our file, bright is 16, value is some negative number, and so if I play the game, here we go, bright is 16, value is -31, player name is that, and audio is 255, so which is clearly different from these numbers because the file was read from the computer and the properties were assigned those values. So now that our reading and writing of settings is working, let's set these numbers to something more reasonable. I'm going to set bright to 0, value to 0, player name to player, and audio to 1. So the brightness, the default brightness is 0, the default value, and value will be for the index of the list for screen resolution, so index 0 of the list will be 1920 by 1080 pixels. I'll go over that later. Player name is going to be by default player, and audio by default is going to be 1, which means it will be enabled. Okay, so since all that's done, I'm just going to change this keyboard S to save the settings to a message. So if I get the message save, I will write the settings. Okay, so now for the screen resolution. I'm going to add a new script and paste res.py from the link in the description. So now you have a new script, and I'm going to name it res.py. So right here, this variable res is a list, and it contains a whole bunch of different screen resolutions that you can have for your game. You can add whatever resolution you want, or you can like even delete a bunch of these, doesn't matter. So now select this resolution text and add a always sensor that is pulse mode on, and Python, and select the script res and connect it. Next I will add a message sensor and make the subject set res, and I will add another Python script. So create a new script and paste this script there. The link to it is in the description. But now actually what I can do to make it more organized is I will cut that and go back to my res script, create a module, define setRes, and I'll paste that in there. Next what I'll do is I will add cont in there, and own equals cont dot owner. You won't have to do that though. I'll just have this entire script with this extra module added at the end available from the start, so you don't have to do that manually. So now change this one to a module and make it res dot set res, and so that should make it so when you apply the resolution, it'll send a message called setRes, and it will execute the module res.setRes. So it gets own x and own y, and then gets the integers of them and sets the window size to those values. Now add two more message sensors. Make it the first one left, and make the second one right, and add two property actuators. Make it add for both of them. The property is going to be val, and add -1 for the first one and 1 for the second one. And connect them all together. Next, click on this little plus button right here and click on this button. Add an always sensor and property. Make it copy. Make the object settings handle. Make it val, property val. So it will copy the property val from the settings handle to this property right here. And then add an actuator sensor, NAND controller, and state to the first one. And make it called property.002. Now to create some more buttons. So select this button behind resolution, and actually no, select resolution, Shift S, cursor to selected, Alt P to clear parent, and Shift S selection to cursor, and make a little smaller, excuse me. And now you can select the button, go into edit mode, actually no, create. Now we have to create some more buttons. So select the resolution text and Shift S, cursor to selected, Alt P, clear parent, Shift S, selection to cursor, and scale it back down. Select the button behind it and make it a new object. Then go into edit mode and make a loop cut right in the middle. Press V on the keyboard and move the two edges about this far apart. Go into face select and select these two faces and delete them. So now you have these two, and that little face there you can delete. Or is it a face? So just select all and then mesh, clean up, delete loose. I think that should do it. No, so just click on some of the vertices, and if they're not connected to anything, just delete them. Okay, and here I have no idea why there's extra vertices there. Okay, so now you just have these two squares right here. So back in the top view, just SX, move them out a bit so that they're outside of the text resolution, maybe about there. And then select the outside ones, SX, bring them back in. W, subdivide, and then select the middle vertice and SX, scale it out to create like kind of a button, like that's in the shape of an arrow. So now tab, A, P, separate by loose, Shift Control Alt C, origin to center of mass. So now you have these two separate buttons here. Okay, so selecting the left button on this top AND controller, make the message left, and on this right button, make the message right. So now, if you play it, you should be able to select the arrows and scroll through the different values in the list, which are the different resolution values. So next we'll create the button for them to apply it. So actually move this arrow a little bit to the left. Okay, so I'm going to select this back button, Alt D, Y, move it down, and with the text, Alt D, Y, create a new text object, make it say apply, and make this message say set res. So that way if you click on it, this resolution text should receive that message and set the resolution. To test that out, first go to the settings.dat file and change these back to some reasonable values. So 0 for brightness, 0 for value, player for player name, and 1 for audio. Save the file, go back to the game, and go to the first layer, and enable full screen and desktop on the render. Click Start. Settings. Oh, and by the way, I did actually create it so you could click on the settings. And settings are not visible for some reason. Why is that? Oh, they're not parented. So select resolution and parent it to this. So now if I go back, settings, yes, it's parented. Okay, so start standalone player. Hopefully changing the resolution doesn't screw up the recording. So I'm going to set it to 1280 by 800. And my screen is black. Okay, after restarting my computer, the script does work. Okay, now for the brightness setting. I'm going to select resolution and the arrows, and Shift D, duplicate them down, and I'm going to rename this to brightness, and this to brightness. I will select this right arrow and make the message say brighter, and this arrow will say darker. Select this object and delete these properties. Add a new property called bright. Sorry about that. Bright, make it an integer, and property bright, copy settings handle, and copy bright. Okay, so it's pretty much the same as this resolution object. So it copies that property, and after it does that, it goes to this state and change val to bright for both of these, and delete these, and change left and right to darker and brighter. Select the left and right buttons and make the left button pulse mode with a skip about 3, and this button pulse mode with a skip about 3. So that way if you hold it down, it will actually increase and you don't have to click it individually. Next, create a new script and copy and paste the bright file, which is a 2D filter I made. It's really basic. It'll just get a uniform integer bright, which is this value, and set the color plus the brightness times 0.01. And now go back to the first layer and add an empty. I will do it right here and move it up. Then I will, with the empty selected, I will add an always sensor, pulse mode on, property, copy, and always with no pulse mode, and it will be a filter, custom filter, and it will be text, which we will call bright, and connect it. Add a property, make it called bright, and make it an integer. Now go back to your layer with all the submenus and find this object, the brightness object. Find the name text.030, go back to the first layer and select this empty we just added, make the object text.030 for the property, copy bright, and assign it to bright. And I will turn on debug properties and turn it off on here. So let's hope this works. If I go into settings and I change, no, it doesn't work. Alright. Why is that? Okay, I figured it out, because we're just changing a game property and not the text property. So add a text property, and on this layer, this not layer, state, add an always, pulse mode on, property, assign, text, value, bright. That should work. Yeah, so I can change it right here. And in fact, I will move this down there even more. Yeah, so that right about there looks good. So if we go back to the first layer and I play it, go back into settings, and it still doesn't work. And that is because I'm trying to copy brightness from the text object, and since it's on another layer, it doesn't really work. So what I have to do is, with this selected, I will delete this, add a message, make the first one darker, and the second one brighter. So you have to do this the same exact way that the text.30 object does it. So property, add, bright, -1 and 1. Connect them up, and that should work. If I play it, settings, yeah, it does. So if you increase the brightness, the color of the screen increases, and you can decrease it as well to negative number, I think. Yeah, that works. So yeah, and I do have to move the button a little bit to the right because there's not much room there. So yeah. And in fact, I can just delete this and make it a number such as 99. Okay. So now we have to cap this number at a certain maximum number so that it can't go above that number. So let's have it property and property, make it greater than and less than. So if bright is greater than -50 and connect that to darker and this one to brighter, and if bright is less than +50, to change it so to test it. There we go, it stops right at 50, as well as -50. So now that we have that done, we have to save the brightness property. So let's see here. It'll always read the settings and save the settings. Okay, so we have to have an always sensor, that is pulse mode, and copy the property. First I actually have to do both bright and val. So first I'll do val, so that I'm copying it from text25, so enter that here, text.025, and property val, connect the always to the property, add another property actuator, copy bright object text30, property bright. Alright, now that that's done, we will have to make an object that will send the save message. So I can do that on the back button. So if I close all this down, we'll add a message, and I will move it all the way to the top. We'll make it say save. So that way when you click back, it should save all these properties to a file. Right here is that file, so I believe that is value, or no, that's brightness right there. And then the second one's value, so they're both 0, 0. So if I go to here and first layer, I play it, settings, I'll change value to, I don't know, like I think that's 8, and brightness to 15, and I click back, settings, see in the file, yeah, 15 and 7. So the first one's brightness and the second one is value. So now the reason it did not apply the properties that it read from the file as soon as you click on settings is because it is reading settings instantly and it is trying to copy settings instantly. So I have to change on this resolution object text25. I have to change this always sensor to a delay sensor of about 5 ticks. So after 5 ticks, it will copy val from the handle, and I have to do that with brightness as well. So back on here, have a delay of 5, and it copies it. So back on the first layer, if I play it, settings, and it doesn't work, of course. And that is because I found out that it's always copying property val and bright from their objects, which initially are at 0 and 0. So we have to add a delay to that. So make it a delay instead of always, and let's see, make it pulse mode, delay of maybe 10. See if that works. Settings. Yeah, it appears to work. So if I go into settings and I'll change this to 640 by 400 and brightness to 40, and I apply it, so it should be saved to the file. If I play it again, settings, nope, didn't work. Okay, so that is because since I just switched val and bright properties, moved val on top, I also did that with the script, and I forgot to change val to 0 and bright to 1, because then I would be reading the two properties switched. So I will delete this property, I mean not the property, the file, and go back to the settings. So I'll set it to 512 by 384 and a brightness of -10. Save that. Go back to the settings, 512 by 384, and the brightness is -10. So now what we have to do is, because the settings object is in the second layer, we have to add another object in the first layer. I will make it an empty that is a cube. I'll move it up. So this object in the first layer is also going to read the settings from the file. So I'm going to add an always sensor, Python, and make it a module, settings.read settings. Connect the two together, and I have to add the four properties. First one is val. It is an integer. Okay, so val bright player name and audio. Okay, so yeah, I'll read those properties. So if I turn on debug properties on, yeah, so it reads those properties from the file. So now select the empty that controls the brightness and delete these messages darker and brighter, as well as their and controllers and the properties. Add a new property actuator, copy bright, and copy the property from this new empty you just added, which is empty.005 in my case. And copy bright. So now with empty.005 selected, change this always sensor to a delay. And actually you won't need to do that. Just leave it as an always sensor, and instead change this one to a delay, the brightness empty. So always becomes delay, a delay of about 5. So this empty reads from the file, assigns the properties, and after 5 seconds it will copy the property bright and do the custom filter, which will use bright to set the brightness of the screen. So yeah, there we go. If we go to settings, change the brightness here, which is not working again, so I'll have to figure out why that is. But yeah, we can change the resolution here, saves it. And if we play it again, yeah, it goes back to 50. So I'll just figure out why it's not changing in the settings, and I'll be back. Okay, yeah, so I figured out why brightness wasn't being changed in the settings submenu, that it was only being changed in the main menu. So what you have to do to fix that is go to your submenu layer and select the brightness text. Yeah, so go back to the first state and you'll have to add a filter to that object. So custom filter, bright, and connect it with the always sensor. So that way you'll have two objects controlling the brightness, and if I just reload that, because the text disappeared, that happens sometimes, I have no idea why. So in settings, I'll be able to decrease the brightness. Now you will probably experience Blender crashing when you click the back button in settings. That is because there are two different 2D filters, and like one's not updating like correctly or something like that. But the way you fix that is if you go to your submenu layer, select brightness, and where you just added that custom filter brightness, disconnect it from that always sensor that has pulse mode and add a new always sensor that doesn't have pulse mode and set it to a pass number of 1. Then add a message, make it say save. That is the message that's sent when you click the back button, and add a filter 2D and remove filter with pass number of 1, so that when you click back it will remove that filter, and it will also, when the message save is sent, on empty.005, the one that reads the settings on the first layer, add a message actuator, a message sensor, and connect it to the Python controller. So that way it will get updated when you click the back button. So settings, back, and it doesn't crash. So the next thing I need to fix is that the brightness increases when you go into the settings. So let me figure that out. Alright, I figured it out. So the reason that happens is because, so if you go to your second layer or the layer with your submenus and you click on the brightness variable, that is because the pass number for the 2D filter was set to 1, so it's like creating a new filter. So if you just set that to 0, and then on the first layer, if you go to the empty that controls the brightness, if you add a message save and connect it to there, that will fix the problem. So right now, oh whoops, one more thing. Change this and to or on the empty that controls the brightness, because if you do it and, if a delay of 5 and a message of save, it will do these two things, but you have to make it an or controller. So if this or this happens, do this. So sorry about that. So if we play it, brightness turns 18, in the settings it's still the same, and when you go back, Blender doesn't crash. Now one more thing before I finish the video off. If you go into the settings, you'll notice that the arrows are transparent just like these buttons when they're on a first frame. So to fix that, you'll have to make them a solid color on the first frame, and you can leave them at orange on their second frame. So what I'm going to do is select the left resolution button on frame 1 and move alpha all the way up and replace the keyframe. So that way, on frame 1, it's going to be solid white, and on frame 2, I will make it a solid orange. So there, if you move it, frame 1, solid white, and frame 2, it's a solid orange. So then open the graph editor in the window, and you'll notice that that is planeaction.008. And so under brightness, if you select one button, change planeaction.0 10 to plain action 008 for both action actuators, and do that also on the second right button right there. So if I go back to frame 1, yeah, there you go. They're initially white so that the user can see where they're clicking on, and they turn orange when they're selected. So if I go to the first layer and I go to settings, yeah, look how nice that looks. So yeah, it's much easier for the user to see what to click on. So yeah, there you have it. I hope I didn't bore you for too long, and I'm actually gonna wait until part 3 of this video to show you how to do the player name and audio properties to save them and load them. Player name is going to be really hard, but yeah, I'm going to wait until part 3 to show that to you, because I really don't want to make this video too long and bore you. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful and educational, and I hope to see you in part 3. Thanks